Blue Lock will undoubtedly go down in history as one of, if not the best sports anime ever. I mean, while other shows focus on delivering hype or staying true to the sports while being actually very good, Blue Lock on the other hand is psychological, or hell sometimes even philosophical, and the writer actually managed to pull that off without presenting any major plot holes. I mean, sure, there were some plot convenience points with Isagi or Rin early on, but overall Blue Lock is rather perfect in its writing. And this is why the problem or the dilemma I am going to discuss today really rubs me the wrong way. Because you see, to me the PXG game is peak Blue Lock. It is the best game for me without a doubt, and it's not because of the hype or it having the highest of levels. Even though of course it did, to me what we learned in that game is definitely the best thing about it. The whole thing with the types of playing styles and the types of egos to me is just the best thing about that game. Because simply put, nothing really explains the players better than this, and for someone who loves to put them against one another, this is just a gold mine for me. And funny enough, it was something that was hinted at in the previous game with Isagi against Barou and how they both chose different paths when it came to their visions. However, come the PXG game, we kinda understood why someone like Isagi or Hiori would choose a weapon like Metavision, while someone like Barou, Yuki or Rin will get a weapon like the Predator Eyes. However, and staying with the Uber's game, things were a bit weird. I mean, think about it. The three most important players in that game, excluding Isagi and Lorenzo, all presented the same dilemma. I'm talking of course about Hiori, Kaiser and Barou. Sure, Isagi, Hiori and Kaiser's movements were all the same, especially on defense. But Kaiser presented the Predator Eyes, and even though Barou at first used them differently, by the end of the game when he scored his second goal, he too was using them the same way Kaiser always did. I'm talking of course about the goal course hunting ability. Which is odd when we think about the whole genius against talented learner thing. I mean, at first, everything was pointing towards Kaiser being a genius. However, as you all know, Isagi demonstrated that it was not the case. I mean, for starter, Kaiser presented Metavision, and so he is definitely leaning towards being a talented learner. However, how Isagi presented things was a bit of a head scratcher for me. You see, when we first saw Kaiser play, Isagi said that he can never replicate the Kaiser impact, even if he trained for his whole life. And even then, someone like Noah, who had much more experience and much more training, said that the Kaiser impact even beats him when it comes to the speed of the shot. And this made us think that Kaiser has a genetic advantage over the rest of the players that allowed him to have the Kaiser impact, exactly like Chigiri and his speed. However, Isagi then kinda changed his mind. He said that even the Kaiser impact was something that he got due to his way of thinking, and that he got it through trial and not really something that he innately had. And that's definitely wrong. I mean, Kaiser did not train more than Rin, more than Barou when it comes to shooting. However, he puts both to shame with his Kaiser impact. And it honestly doesn't make sense how an 18-year-old would beat a pro just through trial or training. I mean, Noah and Prince specifically live to play football, and so through what Isagi assumed, Kaiser can never beat them in this regard. However, we all know that he does, and so what is going on here, honestly? I mean, to be honest, there are kind of a two explanation to all of this. First, what Isagi meant is not actually about Kaiser not having an innate talent. What he actually said, the way Kaiser cultivated that talent is that of a talented learner, which by the way was not like Chigiri, who just impulsively acted upon his speed. Kaiser on the other hand looked at his talent, and he was able to bring forth a weapon that channels fully his innate talent into it. Something that Chigiri kinda did under Prince, which is actually very important for today's video. However, the second point into Isagi's thinking is actually that he's not Law, to be honest. Isagi has made a lot of mistakes before. I mean, hell, even Noah did, especially in the Uber's game. The only one that I would trust fully in Blue Lock is without a doubt Ego. And Isagi is still learning, and so he could have made some mistakes regarding to Kaiser. However, a player that I think would break everything that Isagi said about a talented learner is without a doubt his partner in crime, Hiori. You see, Hiori, despite being a holistic type of ego, was said to have an insane genetics for sports. I mean, even Karasu said that he is insane despite having his brain and body not working together, meaning bro was insane with negative points in mentality. And if you have watched any of my videos, you'd know that this is definitely a genius trait, Rin being the primary example to this. Despite having a very toxic mentality, Rin was able to dominate purely due to his talent and purely due to his impulse. And that kinda was the case with Hiori. I mean, in the third selection, despite him having an inner war, he instantly understood Isagi's playing style and he immediately knew what Isagi needed to do in order to beat both Rin and Shido. However, and despite him seeming to be obviously a genius, we all know that Hiori is definitely a talented learner. And again, it is a bit weird for me to see someone with insane genetics for football and sports in general be considered a talented learner. And I know that Hiori might be one of the obvious ones. However, think about it this way. Since the beginning, Hiori did not care for the striker he plays for. He always delivered a pass to the perfect position on the field. Unlike, for example, Sai or Charles, who always modified their passes in order to meet the striker. Hiori, on the other hand, in total opposition of a talented learner, does not even think about the striker. He just delivers the perfect pass to the perfect position on the field. And we've seen it at the end of the PXG game, he did not even know if it would be Kaiser or Isagi meeting his pass. And honestly, much like a genius, he did not even care. And as you can see, this is getting really interesting. I mean, especially with Hiori, right? Well, it gets even worse when we look at the third problematic player in the Uber's game, Barou Shoei. As you all know, when it comes to ego, there isn't a stronger self-type ego than Barou. And so he is definitely a genius, right? I mean, he never cared about other players, even his teammates. And the only one who he cared about is Isagi because he actually brought his playing style down to the ground. And to a genius, that's the true loss. Someone like Noah doesn't really care about losing a game as long as he scores a hat-trick. And Barou is the same. As long as he is the king of his team, he doesn't really care about losing the game. And so, he's definitely a genius, right? There is no dilemma here. Well, no, even though his way of thinking is definitely that of a genius. Barou's training and his dedication towards football seems to be that of a talented learner. I mean, sure, Rin and Kunigami train like hell as well. However, what we learned from Isagi that a talented learner trains differently than a genius. You see, Isagi is deliberate in his training. His training serves the purpose of advancing his weapons, which again is something that we've seen from Chigiri while training under Prince. However, Barou, despite being a genius, has a training that advances his playing style on the field. Much like Kaiser, Barou trained his shot so it can be the best, and now he has one of the best shots in the entirety of Blue Lock. And from there, his training of getting an insane physique is definitely so he can force his way through and finish the job with his shot. And this is exactly where things get a bit dicey, because that's definitely a talented learner way of thinking. Instead of relying on impulses, Barou is actually crafting a tangible way towards victory, something that we know that is akin to talented learners. However, it gets even worse with Barou. Well, for starters, we know that the Predator Eyes were taught to him by a talented learner. And that's in line with what Ego said, how talented learners discover and nurture geniuses. However, Barou did not stick to what Snuffy actually taught him. Rather, he evolved it. But the way he actually did was the interesting part. You see, when he was forced into a corner by Isagi and Kaiser, Barou, in a talented learner, actually conjured a plan, unlike Rin and Shido, who entirely relied on their impulse. You see, Barou actually took over Ubers with his own plans and designs that actually accounted for both Isagi and Kaiser. Hell, those designs actually were all about luring Isagi and Kaiser. And what's crazy, this was something that is reproducible, because after he scored his goal, Ubers was able to lure both Isagi and Kaiser twice, and they would have won had it not been for Kunigami or Hiori. And that is without a doubt a talented learner way of thinking. That whole process of actually coming up with a plan, a tangible way towards reaching the goal, is definitely a talented learner way of thinking. And like as I said, Shido, Rin, Loki or Noah, who all impulsively dominate so they can score. Barou's plans, much like Isagi's, were very easily absorbed by his team. And if you remember what Ego said, geniuses are often misunderstood, or actually harder to understand. However, Ubers were able to very easily embody the designs Barou had in mind, which is in complete contradiction with him actually being a genius. Well, that's the dilemma. That's Blue Lock's biggest shortcoming for me, not being consistent in this point. However, and to be honest, the biggest head scratcher in Blue Lock is actually none of these three. It's a player that inspired this video to be. You see, while working on Loki versus Prince versus Levi, I started noticing that things are a bit off with Chris Prince. I mean, when we first saw him play, he definitely acted like a genius. There was not a single shred of rationality into his way of thinking, if there was even a way of thinking into his playing style. All he did was impulsively and emotionally act upon the field. I mean, simply put, he is way too irrational to be a talented learner, right? Well, let's look at that actually, because I believe Prince holds the key to the answer to Blue Lock's biggest dilemma. You see, due to Kaiser, Hiori, Aiko, Isigi, and especially Snuffy, we as a community associated being a talented learner with analysis of the field. Usually talented learners are easily identified by this trait specifically, not necessarily metavision, but a crazy enough field readability. For example, we know someone like Karasu is a talented learner before he even awakened his metavision, simply because he was constantly analyzing the field and coming up with his design while playing. However, in this regard, Chris Prince is very lacking. I mean, he almost seems as if he is a genius, not caring about what others think or even what they are doing on the pitch, and only caring about how he can score and how he can shine and be the hero, which, as I said, is in complete opposition of being a talented learner. However, let's ignore this fact for now and look at what Isigi and Ego put as criteria for being a talented learner. There, Chris Prince actually checks every box, even more so than other talented learners like Nico, Hiori, and Kaiser. First of all, despite the love for his body, Chris Prince is definitely a holistic type of ego, because he cares about showing off to the world more than anything. Where, for example, when a genius like Aryu cares about style, it is all in his own little self-centered bubble. Prince, on the other hand, only cares about looking great in front of the world. I mean, he even ignored the clear difference between him and Noah in the ranking, just so he can say that it was close, as if he was saying, hey world, look at me, I am very close to being number one. Then the second talented learner trait is actually his path to being number one. Sure, Prince isn't rational at all, however, is that a problem? Well, from Charles we actually knew that it actually is not a trait to talented learners. Instead, Prince's path towards being the best is actually the best argument for why he is a talented learner. He fully understands that in order to reach his ideal, he needs a perfect body for football. Much like how Isigi lays a plan in his mind before acting, Prince laid a plan to perfect his body so he can shine on the field. In fact, he has such a great eye for perfecting bodies that he can lay plans for other players, for other geniuses like Chigiri and Nagi. Whom, speaking of which, Prince's ability to understand people's body is undeniably a talented learner trait. And we actually have a confirmation for this. Someone like Noah or Loki, for example, did not really care enough about their players and only gave them what they believed to be true. On the other hand, Snuffy and Prince were the only ones who truly understood their players and even came up with designs that actually accounted for them. To Noah, Loki, and Levi, the team really did not matter, only their goals did. While the two talented learners really wanted to improve the lives of their players. And so from all of this, in my mind, without a doubt, Prince is definitely a talented learner. A talented learner that actually goes against the current of most of them being analytical on the field. A talented learner who actually conjured a plan towards being the best in the world without the plan actually accounting for others. Rather, Prince, much like a genius, is a talented learner who excels in plans that rely on evolving one's talent or body, which means there must be something that we are missing here. You see, I truly believe that Isigi did not grasp this whole thing fully, and actually there were a lot of holes in his thinking, which unironically is the key into understanding and then solving this dilemma. And for that, I actually have two theories for you guys. First, what Isigi said about this whole thing is actually a rule of thumb, and not really an absolute law that everyone must follow. And honestly, I wouldn't like that. This honestly seems as if it is lazy writing. And so I am leaning towards the second theory I have, which is there is yet another category of egos, an added layer to Isigi's thinking, which would either put things on a spectrum or introduce a new criteria of deciding whether someone is a genius or a talented learner. And to be honest, I am leaning towards the whole spectrum thing. You see, unlike pure geniuses or talented learners, unlike someone like Rin, Shido, or Isigi, who all are on the extreme of the spectrum, someone who is a genius like Barou is actually closer to a talented learner like Kaiser or Hiori more than Rin or Shido, which is definitely interesting to say actually, and honestly would solve almost any problem. You see, for example, the case with Prince. Despite being a talented learner, on the field he is way too blinded by his own showing, to the point he behaved close to some nasty geniuses like Barou. While on the other hand, Noah, who is definitely a genius, due to his innate talent of looking at things rationally, he cares about what others are doing on the pitch more than, for example, the likes of Loki. And this actually fixes every problem we have about this whole thing, as now instead of having pure extremes of either being a talented learner or a genius, we actually can put people on a spectrum. And honestly, I think at this point I need to do a live stream where I put every player on the spectrum. However, for now, I really hope that my theory actually solved the dilemma for you guys. As I said, instead of just having pure talented learners or pure geniuses, we actually put people on a spectrum. For example, someone like Karasu, someone like Isigi, like Snuffy, like Nico are definitely pure talented learners, while on the other hand, someone like Rin, like Shido, like Loki are definitely pure geniuses. From there, I feel like Noah is closer to being a pure genius than, for example, Barou, and Hiori is actually close to the other spectrum more than he is to the talented learners. He is actually closer to the likes of Barou more than he is close to Isigi, and to be honest, it is getting me excited for doing my first live on this channel. However, that's all I've got for you today, guys. I really hope you enjoyed the video and I would love to hear your thoughts about this dilemma. However, until next time, thank you for watching.